This is the Insta360 X4, a 360 camera that can shoot in 8K. Now 8K doesn't normally bother me. On a normal screen, if you scale up from 4K to 8K, I can't really tell the difference. But in 360, you really can. It's got gesture control, smart software that can remove the selfie stick to make it look like you're being followed by someone from behind. That's a bit creepy. And it can make it look like you're shooting with 4 cameras. I was pointing as if there was 4 cameras, there's 2 cameras, but you can make it look like you're shooting with 4 cameras. Bam, 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 bam. That was all one shot. I'm Kieran, this is the review. Let's get it. Now, as a frugal Indian, I will always start with the price. The camera alone comes in at $499 or $500 in the US and £500 in the UK. And then there are these other bundles that add accessories but also add price. Things like a motorcycle bundle, a diving bundle, and a no drone, no problem bundle, which comes with a ludicrously long selfie stick. But we all know it's not the size that matters, it's how you use it. I'm talking about cameras, of course. So the camera itself is not cheap, but this is what you're getting for it. It can shoot 8K 360 video at 30 frames per second or 4K at 100 frames per second. So you can get 4K super slow-mo shots. And that's compared to the X3, the previous model, that could shoot in 5.7K at 30 frames per second and 3K at 100 frames per second. It can take 722 megapixel photos, has over 2 hours of runtime. So the runtime on this is 135 minutes compared to the 81 minutes on the previous version, the X3. It has a removable lens guard, which I've already attached on top here, and that's a new feature that the old one didn't have, but something I'm really glad to see. It's waterproof up to 10 meters. If you want to go any further than that, you can use a diving case. So the 3 main differences I can see between the X4 and the X3 are: 1, better quality video, so it can shoot in 8K, which when you're scaling a 360 video is very helpful. It has a better battery performance, which is quite significantly better than the old one. And also you have these removable lens guards as well, because the old one came with sticky lens guards. So these little sticky lens guards you could put on there, which I kept on getting in the wrong place. They kept on being in my shot. And so I ended up just removing them completely, which looks fine on the video, but that is at risk of falling and breaking, which for a £500 camera, I do not want to happen. In terms of looks, it looks very similar to the X3. So if you have seen the X3, you've basically seen this one. The main difference is it's slightly chunkier in pretty much all directions, slightly wider, slightly longer, slightly bigger. And so the screen itself, the touchscreen you have at the front, is slightly bigger. And then obviously you've got this ring around the lenses to attach the guards. On the front of the camera, we've got this nice feeling ASMR. So video quality, the most important thing. Here are some example video footage of the video quality of this camera. Now these shots are shot in a cheeky 8K at 30 frames per second. For me, as you know, audio quality is so important because I use this kind of camera, yes, for action things, but also for vlogging as well. And I think if you could use this for a vlogging camera, the audio needs to be, I don't know why I clicked. The audio needs to be on point. I wonder what the audio sounds like. This is a realistic audio test. I'm on a windy rooftop, which I can hear at the moment some traffic noise. I can hear a noise of people in the background speaking. I wonder how it sounds and if you can hear me well. Now the best thing about this camera, which is also I guess the best thing about the X3 as well, is the versatility of a 360 camera. With a single shot, you can crop that in the edit in 4 different directions. You've got the shot in front, the shot behind, the shot to both sides. And that becomes really useful and makes it look so professional, like you're shooting with 4 cameras. And so for something like vlogging where you're talking but also you want some scenery as well, that comes into play a lot. And especially for something like diving where things are coming out very quickly from everywhere, you can look back at the footage and be like, wow, look at all of this stuff that's happening around me. I guess most people using this are not uploading videos in 360, but they're using it to crop and reframe to find the bits of the video that they actually want to use. However, with the new Apple Vision Pro and Meta also trying to compete, the rise of 360 videos is going to be there. And this, I think, is on the cutting edge of that 360 video revolution. And that video is only useful if the resolution is good. And that is the second best thing about this camera, which is the 8K resolution, particularly in bright sunlight, is amazing. Now this feels like a huge upgrade from the X3. The problem a lot of people found with the X3 and a lot of the people say about the X3 is it has 5.7K, but when you are actually reframing that to use that in an edit for a video, you lose a lot of quality because that 5.7K is a 360 video. With the 8K, the resolution and the video quality is noticeably better. The microphones are also really good. The microphones in ideal conditions really do sound like professional microphones. This is without any production or voice isolation or anything like that, and you can really hear the voice very well. In slightly noisier environments, so when I was trying to speak in the car, there is a lot of noise distortion in the background and the voice is definitely less clear. We are currently driving through the cloudy British countryside, the Peak District. I said this was my X3 video, but one of my favorite things about it, I did try and clean it up with the editing software. They have some noise reduction and some voice isolation, but I found neither worked that well for me in my specific situation. The fact that this can then shoot in 8K, cropping this different directions, that resolution is made. That was one of the main complaints of people with the X3. You can change the shooting modes from the 360 mode to a single lens mode, which basically means you're shooting it just straight or back towards you like a normal action camera. The single lens mode on this camera really does look like a normal action camera. You've got the option to have a wide field of view or a more linear field of view, and if you take the linear field of view on a single lens mode, it's like you're shooting with a normal camera. Really clean, really smooth, stabilized footage with the flow state stabilization. There's also a function called Me Mode. Now Me Mode is good for a solo traveler where it'll shoot in a single lens mode, but it will keep you tracked as a person, where it always keeps you in the frame and it does this really big, massive field of view. And this is great for a solo traveler because you can stick this behind you and it makes it look like you've got someone following you just really, really close. So I quite like that, and it's a pretty unique angle to be able to get. If you wanted to set up a normal camera to make it look like someone was following you, you'd have to get someone to follow you, or you'd have to set a camera up and walk away from it. The way it does that is it makes the selfie stick invisible, and it just does that itself. So if you're previewing the video footage on the actual camera, when you look at the footage, the stick is invisible. Sometimes you are holding your hand around something and you can kind of tell it looks a bit sus that you're kind of holding something like this in your hand, but it is getting rid of that big stick. I played around with and also enjoyed quite a few of the other features. So for example, the gesture control works well, very similar to the Insta360 X Pro and a lot of their other products. To start a video on this camera here, all I need to do is put my palm up. And you can do this to take a photo, and that worked pretty well most of the time. There's a bullet time mode, which with this camera is even better. So bullet time is a reference from The Matrix where the bullet's flying and Neo's going like... You can do that with this camera by putting it on a specific mount or by putting it on a string and kind of whirling it around your head. Then what happens is it takes a super slow-mo shot, so I think 4K, 100 frames per second, slows it down, keeps you in frame, and makes it look like time is frozen, but there's something that is kind of spinning around you. So that's kind of gimmicky in my opinion, not something that I would use very often, but I guess something cool if that's something you like to use. And finally, I'm not really into 360 photography, but I did take a few example photos from this. The photos came out really nice, and it is nice to kind of scroll through a photograph, and you do capture a lot when you're shooting in 360. When you look back on a 360 photo, it really feels like you're there. I tried out both of the time-lapse features as well, both the moving time-lapse and the static time-lapse. Both of those worked really well, and I took an 11K time-lapse. Do you know how crazy an 11K? Imagine telling someone 5 years ago that I'm gonna shoot an 11K time lapse with a camera this small, they would think you were mad. And yeah, both of these time lapses came out really nice, as we thought they would. And the advantage of shooting a time lapse in 360 is that you can slowly have that time lapse move in different directions as well. So if there's something going on here, something going on there, I can get the time lapse whilst it's going to slowly move to another side. And then finally, the editing software also works really well. Insta have their own editing software which you can use with this camera, or you can put it into their software and export it for other softwares, which is what I do. I normally put all of the footage in and then export all of the footage to Final Cut Pro, which is what I used to edit with. If you didn't want to pay for editing software, didn't want to pay for Final Cut or a subscription for Adobe Premiere Suite, then you could just use their software and it would be perfectly good for this. Now we've talked about the best things, we need to talk about some of the things that could do with improvement. That's what basically a synonym a teacher used to use for the bad things. Sometimes when you're recording and you're trying to press the screen to wake up the screen again, it just wasn't waking up. I don't know if this is something that I've done or a setting that I'm missing, but it works fine on the X3, but it just wasn't working that well for me on the X4. That's a little bit annoying if you're taking like a time lapse or something, because you want to see how much time has elapsed. Time lapse elapsed, that's pretty cool, to see how long that video has been and if it's due to end soon. So that was something a bit frustrating. With this kind of camera, you pretty much always, to get the best use out of it, will need to carry quite a long selfie stick with you. And obviously the selfie sticks go down like this, but although the camera itself is small, to carry a stick with you, I don't always want to carry a stick with me, so that is a little bit frustrating sometimes. That's kind of eliminated if you're shooting in a single lens mode. You can easily do that handheld, but if you're shooting a 360 video whilst holding the camera, your finger is almost certainly going to be in a lot of those shots, which I found out the hard way when I got my first 360 camera. This one. The footage definitely looks best in bright light conditions and in slightly overcast conditions, like in Manchester where we live, where it's cloudy all of the time. The footage can look a bit dark and certainly doesn't look as good as it does in the brighter conditions. 8K video is fantastic, but you have to bear in mind that 8K video footage is absolutely massive in 360 degrees. So for reference, a 1 minute video from this at full resolution is about 1 gig. So if you're taking a 5-minute video, that's going to be 5 gigs. And if you imagine, if you take this on a long trip and you're taking video after video after video, it really is going to take up a lot of space. So just something to factor in. As resolution improves, we are going to need more storage. So if you're going on like a 6, 7, 8 month trip, you need a storage solution for this for sure. Here's the verdict. This is a relatively expensive 360 camera, but is incredibly versatile. Sometimes companies come out with iterations of new products and they improve something, and there's a question of, is it worth upgrading if I have the one before? And I would say from the X3 to the X4, it almost definitely is. And the main reason is that shooting in 8K and scaling that and cropping that in post-production makes really clear, crisp video footage. And the video footage is noticeably better than the previous one. 8K mode is great, the audio is crisp, the linear mode makes it look like a normal action camera. It's waterproof, it's rugged, it feels well made. And if I was choosing something to buy from Insta360, and I've tried a lot of their products, this would definitely be at the top of the list at the moment. And with a lot of cameras, I'm always saying this will be part of my setup, but not the only setup if I went away on a trip. This could genuinely be the only thing you have in your setup, and then you could have a really fun time with it and take some really cool videos, if you're happy to carry a stick, that is. Take care, guys. I've been Kieran. Subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next one.